And so, you know, on a related note, we had these terrible Parkland shootings, or shootings, 17 dead. The FBI was notified twice at least that this shooter was a nut job and probably should be taken a look at. And the second time, I think it was a family member allegedly who communicated with the FBI tip line, and nothing was done. Is there going to be accountability for that? And then, of course, you've got the local authorities who supposedly had been notified repeatedly. They were out at his house 39 times, and I'm sure the stories will get worse. And they didn't do anything. So this is ultimately a failure of government to protect the safety of American citizens. So what is the left-wing response, the socialist response? You know, this anti-gun propaganda. And, you know, and I think the good news is that President Trump is really diverted the discussion in a positive fashion, where he's talking about, well, what are we going to do to protect students who are virtually unprotected as a result of, again, liberal anti-gun policies that make schools gun-free zones or nearly gun-free zones. And he's talking about arming certain teachers and providing more security in a reasonable way. And I think that's a fine direction, you know. But what about the corruption and incompetence of the agencies? Is there going to be accountability at the top levels of the FBI for not being able to follow up on basic tips that, because they're not followed up, result in the loss of nearly 20 people's lives needlessly? And of course, you've got the local corruption as well. Is there going to be accountability? Well, I suggest we demand accountability. You know, you know, the casual way in which, quote, government makes mistakes and people get killed and no one gets punished is infuriating. As I went through last week, you had the FBI screw up on 9/11, the Boston bombings, the Pulse nightclub shootings. And I'm sure the list is too long for me to recount. And of course, most recently this. And I can't help but raise this because it drives me crazy when I hear leftists talk about gun control. Because this gun control fanaticism led to Fast and Furious. You won't hear about this anywhere else on the media, and I encourage you to get our documentary, District of Corruption, which we did in partnership with Steve Bannon, because we have a very good examination of the Fast and Furious scandal in that documentary. I know it's available on Amazon. District of Corruption. But this is it in a nutshell. The Obama administration, in its anti-Second Amendment zeal, thought it was a good idea to kind of blame the American gun industry, sellers, for Mexican drug gang violence. So how did they do that? Well, they engineered large sales of weapons with the goal of having them show up at crime scenes in Mexico. This was the Department of Justice, Eric Holder, the ATF. Well, that led to the death, because one of the guns was used in the shooting, which led to the death of Brian Terry, Customs Border Patrol agent, and I think 300 Mexicans the last time I checked. So the next time you hear anyone associated with the Obama administration talk about gun violence, just recall they knowingly allowed guns illegally to go into Mexico with the hopes they should be used in crimes. And as Eric Holder, who went into contempt of Congress, the first Attorney General ever to do so, to cover up Fast and Furious, admitted these guns would be used in crimes for years to come. In fact, we already know that because Judicial Watch uncovered, through the Freedom of Information Act, and through our intrepid investigations that the guns were still being used as of a few years ago. Again, a government gun program not designed to get the Mexican drug gang stopped. No, designed to make America's Second Amendment look bad and to restrict sales of certain weapons and restrict sales generally as part of their gun control agenda. That's Fast and Furious. And I don't want you ever to forget what went on with Fast and Furious. And frankly, if I were in the Trump administration, I'd make it a priority to expose every last detail about Fast and Furious. That's the gun violence. So we have two cases now of the FBI incompetent in terms of gun violence, meaning in this case the incompetence of the FBI, bureaucratic malfeasance. And then you had the Justice Department and ATF actually help promote gun violence during the Obama administration. So if you don't like gun violence, you really need to fix government. And in the meantime, as those of us who support the Second Amendment, we need the reasonable ability to protect ourselves and protect our children. And so I'm glad the president isn't falling into the left-wing narratives as easily as others might in the Republican establishment on this whole gun control fanaticism out of the left. And again, it's Judicial Watch who does the hard work of figuring out what the left has been up to and what the government's been up to in terms of its failures and its wrongdoing in terms of actually getting people killed.